This is the Stephen Mansfield Podcast.
Well, welcome to the Stephen Mansfield Podcast, the podcast where we look at our times through the lens of faith and leadership, character, and history. I want to dive right in. You know, one of the things I resist doing in this podcast is just commenting on the news. First of all, I can do things that I think are more important than that, number one. Number two, I think that you have so much of that thrown at you that I'm not helping you if I just comment on the news. And also, I think it just becomes a boring ping pong match in our society. Trump does something, the press responds, and everybody goes positive or negative, but their hair is on fire, and we watch it and then we change channels. I don't think it changes anything. I'm not sure that it's the best of us. But I do, in this particular podcast, want to talk about something that I think is important that Donald Trump is doing. Now, I want to say, first of all, that Donald Trump and his new administration have done some very good things. You know that I have some concerns about him, and you know that I often disagree with him. And I certainly wish that his character was nobler. But I do think he's doing some very important things. I think he's made some very wise appointments to the cabinet. I think he's going after some things. He's one of the few presidents we've ever had who declared war on what he had been elected to be in charge of. So he has declared war on the deep state. He has declared war on the federal government and its bloated ways. He's declaring war on some of our arrangements worldwide that have not been good for America. I think he's a patriot. I think he's a man with good leadership skills. I think he's a man with courage. I think he doesn't care what people think about him. The people elected him overwhelmingly, and I think he's trying to bring change to America for the good of future generations. That's fundamentally what I think. I say all of that now positively because I'm about to go after him. All right. I think that Donald Trump is pretty good at most domestic issues. But where he is pretty poor is in my area of focus, primarily when it comes to politics and leadership, and that is international affairs. I do other things. I advise on First Amendment issues, and I advise on religion and American life. But the main area that I work in D.C. and work internationally has to do with international affairs. And I think that Donald Trump could not be more incorrect than in thinking what he does about the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, let's just review for a moment. On February 24th, 2022, Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. He invaded it because he mystically believes that Ukraine, in its history and unique features of its history, is a spiritual source for Russian greatness. He invaded it because the Ukraine has always been the breadbasket of the Soviet world and the Russian world. He needs those resources. He invaded it because he wants a warm water port, which has always been a motive in Russian history. He invaded it because he doesn't like Vladimir Zelensky. He invaded it for other reasons. And by the way, he invaded it because there were Russians within Ukraine who began to cry out that their rights were being messed with. Now, that probably was a false flag operation, but nevertheless, Putin did it for many reasons, and we don't need to explore those now. But there's no question, everybody agrees that Vladimir Putin invaded the Ukraine. Russia was the aggressor. Now, I have to tell you that I have been impressed with Zelensky since then. In fact, I've actually given talks in D.C. and elsewhere where I call Zelensky a Churchill for our time. Because he's the most unlikely leader on our international stage, but he's been pretty amazing. He's Jewish. He's a lawyer. He grew up in a family very much controlled by the Soviet world, as you can imagine. He eventually became an actor and a comedian, unusual for his training. And he actually, the way he really broke onto the national stage within Ukraine and then eventually the international stage is that he wrote a script for a TV show called Servant of the People. And in this, a popular high school teacher is caught accidentally on camera giving a talk about what ought to happen in the country. He's passionate. He's inflamed. He's giving a talk about what ought to happen in the country. Somebody records it. It goes viral. And in the TV show, this man becomes the leader of the country. Well, in a way of art, predicting life, that's exactly what happened in Ukraine. His prominence from this TV show, which went all over the world. By the way, I've even watched it on Netflix. I'm not sure it's still there, but it was for a while. This show went all over the world, made Vladimir Zelensky popular, made him very popular in the Ukraine, caused people to start to listen to his political opinions, just the same way it happens here in the U.S. when we listen to the political opinion of a Brad Pitt or whomever, because they're well known and they're liked as actors, and suddenly their opinions politically make a difference. And so he began to become popular, and doggone it if he didn't become the leader of the Ukrainian people. Now, he was popular. He was Jewish. He was good at what he did. He believed in the Ukrainian people. He was a populist, but he also was wanting to undo the corruption that is the legacy of the Soviet Union in every former Soviet republic. Every realm that the Soviet Union dominated, as the Soviet Union receded, it left a corrupt, bureaucratically driven, just oligarchic kind of situation that was devastating to the people on the street. So Zelensky went after that. Of course, a lot of that corruption was encouraged by Vladimir Putin. Well, there had been a move by the Russians into Crimea in 2014, and that created some tensions. But now with this latest incursion, with this open attack, Zelensky became a Churchillian figure, in my opinion. War came, and he morphed. This is one of the things that's a big theme in history. People who are unusual choices, people whom you wouldn't maybe have chosen at the time that war broke out, or that history, their greatness was thrust upon them, as Shakespeare said, they begin to morph. They begin to change. They begin to transform to suit the moment and to suit the role. And I think this is what Vladimir Zelensky did. I mean, you can go on YouTube and you can find video of Zelensky doing a comedy show where he's playing the piano with his penis back when he was an actor. I mean, this is the kind of silly Saturday Night Live kind of humor that he would sometimes engage in. But then he morphs. He writes a more serious show. He acts in that more serious show. It propels him into a more serious role in the country. He becomes the president. And now he's a Churchillian figure trying to rally the world as he tries to resist Russia. Okay, I'm going to keep going for a few more moments. I know I'm probably ticking some of you off, but just stick with me. One of the things I love about him is that he decided to speak to and summon the spirit of his people in a very Churchillian way. If you have seen this symbol, the kind of stylized trident that is used as the symbol of Ukrainia, the country Ukraine, then this was something Zelensky summoned. There had been some archaeological digs. They discovered this ancient symbol, realized it was a symbol for the people, land of Rus, it used to be called. And he said, well, let's make this our symbol. And so he got some artists to draw that up. They now have it on their flags. You'll see it on what Zelensky wears. I also have a shirt that I wear with that Ukraine flag. Now, I have no ethnic connection to Ukraine at all. I have none of that bloodline in me at all. But I just admire what they do. I have many friends who are Ukrainian. I've traveled in Ukraine, and I'm a big believer in their cause. So what he did was he did what Churchill did. He began to talk about the greatness. Remember Churchill, the greatness of the British people, and if this war should last 1,000 years, they will say this was our finest hour, and the old world, will rise, and on and on, and all this that he did to summon the spirit of the people. Well, Zelensky began to do that. And as the war broke out, he was very courageous. He would be on the front lines. He would use his cell phone, and he would broadcast reports standing where the missiles were falling. Time and again, Putin said, we're going to kill this man. We're going to take out Vladimir Zelensky. And he would actually send video directly to Putin, or he would taunt Putin on video. He'd say, look, I'm standing right here. Come get me. He lived with his troops. He lived simply. Of course, his wife and his children were, hidden away somewhere else. And yes, Zelensky was a wealthy man. And some people, blame him for that. Talk about how he has money out of the country. Well, I have money out of the country and I'm not that wealthy. That's not a big deal. That's just people looking for something to gripe about. So yeah, he owned a television show that went worldwide. Of course, he's going to be a multi-millionaire, but he was putting himself in harm's way. He was living with the troops. He was using his cell phone to broadcast. He would make himself the symbol of the resistance, just like Winston Churchill did when he would go to the roof of buildings and fire his pistol at the German planes bombing London. I mean, this is part of the art of leadership. He also sent language into battle. He would do video broadcasts to gatherings of Congress or gatherings of Parliament, and he would quote Churchill, and he would talk about finest hour, and he would summon them to greatness, and he would talk about the difference between the dictatorial darkness of Putin and what Ukraine was trying to accomplish. He sent his language, whatever language he was using. He speaks a little of 4 or 5 languages, and a lot of Ukrainian, of course, and he would send those languages into battle. And it was powerful. You can watch those speeches online. And he brought faith to the battle, too. He once said, the Russians, count on the fact that God's retribution isn't instant, but he sees. He answers. You cannot hide from his answers. No bunker can protect you from God's justice. This is the way he spoke. Now, all of that is me admiring Zelensky, the person. But let me tell you something more. Zelensky's been hammered, especially by some conservatives here in the United States, because he has suspended elections and he has disbanded certain political parties there. Well, let me explain this, and then I'm going to tell you where I think that Donald Trump is wrong. Under the Ukrainian constitution, if a nation is under martial law, which any nation would be if it's at war, it's the same thing we did during World War II, high restrictions on freedoms and requirements, and certain things you couldn't eat, certain things you couldn't buy, certain supplies you couldn't have, etc. I mean, that's just the way it is when a nation's at war. But under the Ukrainian constitution, when martial law is declared, you cannot have presidential elections. In other words, you freeze the country. And this is both because you want to maintain security and you want to maintain stability, but it's also because how fair is it for the government to control the people under martial law and then to have elections? That's exactly what Ukraine had broken away from in Russia and in the Soviet days. So all that to say, the Constitution requires a suspending of elections, and that's what Vladimir Putin has done. And by the way, for this reason, Donald Trump has called him a dictator, which is one of the dumbest things Donald Trump has ever said. Number two is this. Number two is that Zelensky has banned certain political parties. Well, remember now that in most countries, you don't just have Democrat and Republican. You don't just have a two-party system like we have in the United States. You have many parties. And in Ukraine, some of those parties are actually Russian. They're Russian. They're peopled by Russians. They're advocates for Russians. They're connected to Moscow. Well, when you're fighting a certain people, you don't give them a political party within your government. We actually, and we shouldn't have, but we actually put in prison camps Japanese during World War II because we were concerned about them having liberties and thus being able to be agents of the Empire of Japan. Well, suppose they'd had a political party. Suppose there was Democrat, Republican, and whatever you want to call, the Rising Sun political party that's all Japanese. We would never have allowed that during World War II. Never. Well, that's exactly what Zelensky's dealing with in Ukraine. So the parties he banned were not just people who disagreed with him, but were good democratic parties. No, they were parties that were advocates for Russians, connected to Moscow, and doing Moscow's bidding. So what's happened recently is that Trump's come into office. He is a businessman first. He doesn't like wars. Okay, I'm with him. I mean, I believe in peace. I believe that wars are curses. You only have them if you absolutely have to. And I think he wants to bring an end to the war, partially for his own reputation, partially because it's costing us a lot of money, partially because he's trying to, rationalize American budgets and the size of American government and what have you, and maybe discipline the military-industrial complex that we have been warned about since Eisenhower and even hinted at in George Washington's farewell address. So I'm with all of that basic approach. The problem is that Donald Trump is such a fan of Vladimir Putin. He likes strong leaders / dictators, and he's enamored of Putin. And so he has met with Putin separate from Zelensky. He has talked about what peace might look like. Zelensky has said, hey, you're not going to have any peace without me at the table, without Ukraine at the table. You know how Trump always overstates, always goes too far. If he wants to get $100, he says he's going to sue you for $1 million. He knows he'll end up at $100 if he makes the claim massive. So if he wants $10 from Stephen, he's going to say, you owe me $100. And I'm going to say, I don't. And then we're going to argue. And then $10 is going to look really good. That's exactly what he did with tariffs with Canada and Mexico. It's exactly what he does all the time in politics. He wants one, so he lays claim to 50. And then eventually it's wheedled down. Well, that's what he's doing now. So he has recently, within the last days of me recording this podcast, he has called Zelensky a dictator. He has said that he is misusing American funds. He has insisted that Ukraine give the United States $500 billion worth of natural resources, which is far more than the U.S. has given Ukraine in pursuit of victory in this war. Trump is absolutely in league with Putin. And by the way, I don't believe this myself, but let me just tell you how bad it's gotten. There are some ex-Soviet agents who have come out and said there's no question that Donald Trump was and is was back in the day a KGB asset, that he had a code name, Krasnov, and that he still is. Now, I don't know if that's true. I'm just saying it's being said during all this time. But I will tell you that there's no question that though Russia invaded Ukraine and has been bloody and terrible, bombing schools, bombing orphanages, bombing apartment complexes, devastating civilians, wiping out infrastructure. Ridiculous. And by the way, Ukraine is a country that has 10% of the military and 10% of military spending that Russia does. So this is like us taking on Guam or something, or taking on some little island country somewhere, taking on Greece, the United States taking on Greece. We would devastate them, and that's what Russia has attempted to do. And frankly, the Ukrainian fight back has been noble. But here's part of the problem. A decadent people don't know how to have enemies. A decadent people just want peace to happen so we can all, have our chocolate ice cream and our MTV and our internet and not be bothered. But this is an evil going on in this war. There is one side, the aggressor, and the other side defending, although God knows, and thank God, Ukraine has been vicious in the fight and has held their own. And to call Zelensky a dictator, and to say the Ukrainian cause is not noble, and to say that the United States should side with Russia against Ukraine, I got to tell you, this is all folly. And though I admire a good deal of what Trump has done, in this area, he is completely wrong and deceived. The money we're spending over there is light. Yes, we should hold in check the American military-industrial complex and really pay attention to how BlackRock is directing a lot of these things. But this is a noble fight, and if Mr. Trump has influence with Mr. Putin, it should be to get Mr. Putin to back off. But insulting Zelensky, diminishing the Ukrainian cause, all of this is atrocious. So I want you to make your voice heard. I want you to call your congressmen and your senators. I want you to, as much as you might admire Donald Trump, he's wrong on this. He is basically siding with Hitler against Churchill, to put it in World War terms. What kind of nobility is in that? Let's be a good and a noble people. Yes, let's work towards peace. Absolutely. It's time for this ridiculous and bloody war to end. But it shouldn't end with the Ukrainians being labeled the terrorist and Zelensky a war criminal and dictator and Putin celebrated. That would be the sign of a decadent people.
Stephen Mansfield is a New York Times best-selling author, a popular speaker, and a frequent faith and culture commentator in international media. His groundbreaking books on faith and society include The Faith of George W. Bush, The Search for God in Guinness, Mansfield's Book of Manly Men, and Lincoln's Battle with God. Learn more at stephenmansfield.tv.